I'm Jefferey Bishop. I'm at St. Louis University, where I'm professor of philosophy and I hold the Tenet Endowed Chair in bioethics. As a culture, we're in a new environment. We're in a new situation. We're seeing kind of a revolution in a technology, and every time there's a revolution in technology, we see it both as an innovation, but at the same time, it's also a disruption. And so we're kind of trying to figure out how we respond to all the possible disruptions in a way that remains humane, that remains kind, that preserves the integrity of human beings, of creation, of the world around us without harming people. And so we're kind of at this moment with AI, which promises to kind of transform, but also disrupt the typical habits of our culture, so that we can address those in a way that maintains continuity with the past while and preserving the best of the past while kind of moving into the future. And then how do we reshape society in relation to novel technologies that have first disrupted, but now how do we reintegrate those into the culture and into society? If you think about science, science has to divide things into smaller and smaller bits. And it's really hard to reconfigure all of the bits. So we've got the physics over here, we've got the chemistry and the biology and the sociology and anthropology and technologies that are each doing work in all of those things, right? But there's no way to get a vision of the whole. And in the Western intellectual tradition, theology was called the queen of the sciences, because in the Western tradition, God is in relation to everything. And if God is in relation to everything, and if everything reveals something about God, then the theologian is the one who can try to hold all of the pieces that are in relation to God together. So even if you don't believe that, in a God, there is a sense in which we need some sort of vision of the whole. And it's hard to get a vision of the whole if all you have are these piecemeal bits. And so anytime you try to bring a vision of the whole, you're engaged in what the ancients would have called theology as a science, a way of knowing the world as a whole. So I think that's the reason we have to think theologically about that. And as a Christian, then that means we have to think about certain aspects of creation as itself a revelation of the divine. And that all things, as Scripture says, that when God made it, it's always at the end of the day, and it was good. And so there's something about the goodness of God being revealed, but also about the goodness of creation that we have to preserve. So there's something inspiring about that. And so I think that's why theologians need to be speaking into these spaces. When you have to think about the whole, and in terms of the whole, you have to start somewhere, and you have to start by understanding all of the bits that go together. But then we need to bring it into a kind of language that is inspirational, so that we don't get bogged down in the details of a particular science, let's say. It seems to me our endeavor here has been to try to pull those things together into the best light that we can bring them, and then to speak inspirationally about those, and to try to stir the human spirit about wanting to participate in a constructive project. And then that means we have to then bring it back down to kind of like, oh, well, we can't just be pie in the sky inspirational. We have to bring it down and distill it into practical, everyday sorts of language, because this disruption that's happening with technology is going to affect everyone. By bringing it back down to the everyday sort of pedestrian language, you make it so that people find an entry point to what we're trying to do, but hopefully also capture some of that inspiration that we're also trying to maintain while we're doing it. So we could probably name several devices in the history of humankind that would radically disrupt and call for a kind of reconfiguration of culture. The one that comes to mind that's probably had the most impact on humanity is probably the printing press. When the printing press came on, you had society was built mostly around oral traditions So in religion, the oral tradition is the Mass, all right? It's a representation of the story of Christ, right? So the Mass was the main vehicle by which Christianity spoke about its truths in that time period, right? When the printing press comes along, you start to see a shift away from that to the Bible, right? So now that you can print the Bible, now you have a record, a different way of recording the life of Jesus or the works of Jesus or the history of Christianity or the history of Judaism, right? So suddenly you've got a different way of thinking about and presenting the beauty of the culture that existed before. Whereas before it was more in an oral presentation, recitation, a singing together of the Psalms. Now it becomes a reading, and it radically changes culture, so much so that religion changes. You get the Reformation because of the possibility of the printing press. Not only does religion change, but you also see politics begin to change at that time. So the technology itself sort of reconfigures. And we also see, because of the printing press, we actually see a different way of thinking about nature. So it even changes the way we imagine science and what we imagine science to be doing. So the printing press is one of those moments that was really pivotal in a technology, really pivotal in changing our imaginations about how we live together, how we live in the material world and in the scientific world. And so this AI may be doing the same thing. We may be at one of those really important moments, right, where we have to rethink politics. We have to rethink religion. We have to rethink even science itself as we engage with these novel technologies. If we take the printing press as the example, it was kind of a major thing in Europe, and it changes Europe, and then it goes on to change the world. We're in a different moment now. We are so interconnected now because of all kinds of other technologies that AI will have ripples into every corner of the world. And it'll even have ripples into parts of the world that don't have technologies. It will have effects on our ecology. So we have to come together. I mean, this is a moment where the disruptions are potentially so caustic and problematic for all of humanity that we have to. So gathering together in Oxford from all corners of the world has been a good thing. What we probably need are more everyday sort of folks who don't even use technology in the room. We don't have that here, but it's a start.